now, please, I want to thank everybody for attending the conference. Now I just want to give the floor to our moderators, Russia,
All right. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. In the first sessions, we were talking about Asia socioeconomic profile from quality to quantity. There are a couple of questions that we tackled. One of them was about the models that can be implemented in terms of the economic cooperation in Asia. And based on the highlights from our presenters today in the first sessions, that the first speakers talk about the new models of looking at into 3Ds. It is called as 3Ds, development, dignity, and democracy, become one of the important things to be developed in Asia, especially in terms of the economic development. And also, there's also a talk about the vulnerability of Asia's economic interdependence, because at some point that Asia is so dependent on one another that it puts it in more risk in terms of how they will tackle the challenge in the future. And the next speaker also talks about the how the state plays as a catalyst in economic growth and cooperation, and how the private sector can be technological innovators in terms of providing more opportunities for economic growth. But then again, there's also some critique addressed to the economic development, for example, in terms of lack of inclusiveness and then uneven distribution of wealth. In this case, that some countries tend to be more getting richer and the other stays and then becoming poorer. So this is also one of the problems that might contribute to the instability in the region. It's about the third speakers talk about how Asia looks itself in terms of managing the challenges in the future. For example, how Asia tends to be more pragmatic in terms of solving all the problems and solving all the challenges that they have. And not only that, there's also a tendency for the Asian countries to be maintain the status quo, rather than going to have more innovations and new things in terms of the economic system. But the idea about the tendency of the Asia to maintain the status quo is also one of the highlights that was discussed in the first session. And happens in Southeast Asian countries. So especially on the rise of middle class, characterized by more self-confident
and mutualization strategies. We had 4 speakers. So I just want to highlight some of the key points that stood out most in my mind. One of the speakers talked about how that the US should work with Russia, China, and Europe to help stabilize conflict areas. For Asian countries themselves, the role of Asian countries is to provide a multilateral platform and to have a more inclusive approach. Another speaker spoke about the lack of significant progress in the region. There tended to be a gap between rhetoric and what was actually realized on the ground. And so there's this gap between implementation and rhetoric. It was also mentioned how every country had different challenges, different perceptions. And in the end, there was this feeling that the status quo was very much remained, that he wasn't very optimistic that there would be much progress in the code of conduct. Nevertheless, there was a feeling that there would be no open conflict seen in the foreseeable future. Another speaker spoke about how the Asia Pacific was relatively a very stable region when compared to North Africa, to the Middle East, Eastern Europe. However, while the degree of tension was much less, there was always the potential for conflict. There was also discussion about the Asian paradox, how we see how countries in the region were becoming much more closer in terms of our economy. We're becoming much more integrated, much more independent. But at the same time, there's a lot of tension, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of distrust when we talk about the politics and security. There was a worry that the situation right now was not too different. see rising nationalism, and I was feeling that one crucial factor between the situation right now and the situation before the First World War was the fact that the peoples in this region recognize the importance of economic development. So moving to the Q&A, there was a lot of questions about the Asian paradox, whether we can separate politics and economics, and whether economics was replacing geopolitics. There was also discussion about Japan and how it was becoming a normal state and how this was impacting on the region, and also discussion on terrorism, whether this was a sign of a declining state or whether this was a sign of something different. And we still haven't
several dialogues going on.
Relation between perceptions and reality. We established that Russia, of course, was a Asian country, much larger than Russia and European. Most of Russia's natural resources are also in Asia. But the perception in most Asian countries are that Russia is a purely European country, which is surely not entirely correct. For example, if some people think that Russia is very far from Indonesia, this is not true. If you talk about Moscow, where I come from, this really is far. But Vladivostok, which is on the other side of Russia, is only 6,000 kilometers from Jakarta. And Delhi, for example, is only 5,000 kilometers. So it's about the same distance. And of course we know India much better here in Indonesia than Russia. So many people from various Asian countries were saying the same thing, that the perception does not fit the reality. For example, there was a very interesting presentation from Indonesia made based on opinion poll among students. And we found out that some students, just 1/4 of the students, 25% in Indonesia, still think that Russia is a communist country. Well, it's a bit outdated idea. So we all agreed that we all need to do more to change this perception. Russia needs, and we had a lot of interesting proposals, specific proposals in this field, economics, in politics and culture. What should we do specifically to change the mindset?
Conferences leading into this program. So this research, we are the world. We publish them on our website. So if you want to participate somehow in this program, just give us information, and that's all.
ASEAN is very important to us. Also, ASEAN, I would say, many countries of ASEAN, labor is now, and generally investment conditions are much better. Labor is cheaper than not only in Japan and South Korea, but also in China. So ASEAN has labor population. So we need to develop these markets.
Thank you so much.